All right, let's pull back the heavy, moth-eaten curtain on another particularly grim corner of medieval existence. Forget the valiant quests and feasts for a moment. We're venturing into a realm where your own body could become your most terrifying enemy and society your most brutal judge. Tonight, we're exploring the slow, creeping dread and the utter, soul-crushing despair of a life sentence handed down not by a king or a court, but by the insidious betrayal of your own flesh. We're about to uncover just why it truly, profoundly, and horrifically sucked to be a medieval leper. But hey, before we plunge headfirst into that abyss of historical woe, and you get all settled in for the grim details, if this is the kind of deep dive into the darker side of history you appreciate, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, let me know down in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. And what other historical lives or grim professions do you think deserve the "why it sucks to be Prussia" treatment? I get some of my best ideas from your suggestions, so please drop your thoughts and ideas in the comments below. I do read them all. It's always fascinating to see our community of history buffs tuning in from across the globe. Right, now that's out of the way. Brace yourselves. Imagine your life begins like a simple, unremarkable thread in the vast, coarse tapestry of medieval peasant life. You're born in a daub and wattle hut, probably smelling faintly of wood smoke, damp earth, and unwashed linen. Your early years are a blur of chasing scrawny chickens in a muddy yard, huddling with siblings for warmth on a straw-stuffed pallet, and learning the hard, swift justice of your mother's hand for filching an extra oatcake. You feel the sun on your face as you help with chores in the fields, the biting wind as you gather firewood in the dwindling light of autumn. You have a name, a family, a small, predictable world bounded by the village church and the Lord's forested lands. You belong in that unquestioning way of a child who knows no other reality. Life is a cycle of toil, prayer, and the occasional rough-spun joy of a village festival. You are, for a precious fleeting time, utterly, blissfully normal. Then it starts. So quietly, so insidiously, you might initially mistake it for a trifle. A small, unusually pale patch of skin appears on your forearm, perhaps, or a stubborn numbness that settles in your fingertips, making the familiar feel of your tools or a wooden spoon strangely distant. You might scratch at the patch, thinking it nothing more than a touch of winter's dryness, or the mark of a forgotten bruise. Or maybe a sore erupts on your shin, one that weeps and stubbornly refuses to heal, despite your mother's anxious ministrations with concoctions of herbs and pig grease. You're young, you tell yourself, accustomed to the nicks and scrapes of a life lived close to the earth. It's a passing thing, surely, but the patch of skin doesn't fade. Instead, it might lose all feeling, becoming dead to a pinprick or the heat of the cooking fire. The unhealing sore could deepen, its edges growing hard and discolored, emitting a faint, unsettlingly sweet odor. A peculiar weakness might creep into your hand, your grip faltering, objects slipping unaccountably from your grasp. Fear, a cold, slithering serpent, begins to uncoil in the pit of your stomach. You start to hide the affected parts of your body, pulling your sleeves down further, even in the sweltering heat of summer, wrapping your leg in extra rags, making excuses for your sudden clumsiness. You examine yourself in secret, by the dim light of a tallow candle or a sliver of moon, scrubbing frantically at the offending marks, praying to any saint whose name you can recall that this is just a temporary affliction, a test, anything but that, because you've seen them. The outcasts, the ones who walk apart, their faces often shrouded, their presence announced by the desolate rhythmic clack of a wooden clapper or the mournful toll of a small bell. You've seen the way other villagers hastily make the sign of the cross, pulling their children close, their faces masks of revulsion and superstitious terror, sometimes even hurling a stone or a curse as the unfortunate soul shuffles by. The word itself, leper, is a spoken hex, a judgment that echoes with the finality of damnation, a social death sentence whispered in hushed, fearful tones. The insidious betrayal of your own body continues its relentless march. Perhaps a strange thickening of the skin on your forehead occurs, or your earlobes begin to elongate and develop nodules. Your eyebrows, once unremarkable, might start to shed, leaving your face with a stark, unnatural smoothness that draws unwanted attention. Your voice, the one you used to sing in the fields or haggle at the market, could become progressively hoarse, a rasping shadow of its former self. And the numbness, that terrifying harbinger, continues its silent conquest, rendering you insensible to injuries that then fester, leading to further decay. Your family, those who share your meager bread and board, are the first to truly see. They try to deny it, their eyes skittering away from the evidence on your skin, their reassurances sounding hollow, even to their own ears. But fear is a powerful corrosive. Your mother's weeping becomes more frequent, her prayers more desperate. Your father's silence grows heavier, his gaze filled with a torment that mirrors your own. Your siblings, once your playmates, now edge away from your touch, their innocent cruelty fueled by the anxieties they absorb from the adult world. The fragile web of familial intimacy begins to fray. The charade, born of love and terror, cannot hold. Eventually, a village elder, his face etched with the grim wisdom of years, or the parish priest, his expression a careful balance of pastoral duty and doctrinal revulsion, is called upon. There are no learned physicians with intricate diagnostic tools in your humble village. The examination is a public or semi-public affair, your afflicted flesh exposed to their searching, fearful eyes. They look for the telltale signs, the thickened skin, the loss of sensation, the nodules, the lion-like faces that mark the advanced stages of the unclean sickness. They might poke and prod, their touch sending shivers not of pain but of sheer unadulterated dread down your spine. And then the verdict, delivered perhaps with a sigh of grim finality by the priest, invoking God's inscrutable will or the wages of some unknown sin, or maybe barked out by a pragmatic village official concerned only with the health of the community. It is the affliction, he might declare, his voice echoing in the sudden, deathly hush. The malum incurabile, the incurable evil. You are pronounced a leper. In that single devastating moment, the life you knew, every simple joy, every connection, every hope for a normal future is violently extinguished. You are no longer a son, a brother, a villager. You are a pariah, a walking corpse, an object of fear and disgust. The true soul-shattering horror of your new existence is just beginning to dawn, and the gates of society are already slamming shut in your disfigured face. The word leper echoes in the stunned silence of your small world, a death knell for the life you once knew. Your mother's initial heart-wrenching wails subside into a choked, continuous weeping, a sound that scores itself onto your soul. Your father, his face aged a decade in a matter of days, moves like a man in a trance, his eyes hollow with a grief he cannot voice. The community, once a familiar tapestry of faces, now recedes, their fear a palpable wall between you and them. You are a contamination, a blight, a walking embodiment of God's displeasure, or, at the very least, a terrifying harbinger of suffering and decay. The days that immediately follow the pronouncement are a suspended animation of dread. You are confined, isolated within your own home, or perhaps moved to a dilapidated outbuilding, a shunned space where your meals are left at a distance, your presence already considered too dangerous for close contact. Whispers follow you like flies, buzzing over a corpse. The village priest, having delivered his grim verdict, now consults with the local reeve or the steward of the manor. Arrangements are being made. Arrangements for your formal public unmaking, The appointed day arrives with a leaden sky, as if nature itself mourns your impending social demise. You are summoned to the church not as a parishioner, but as the subject of a terrifying ritual, the Missa de Separatione Leprosorum, the Mass of Separation, or some local equivalent. It is, in essence, your funeral, though your heart still beats, your lungs still draw breath. You might be forced to wear a shroud, or perhaps you are already clad in the rough, dark sackcloth that will become your uniform. If you are permitted inside the church at all, it is to a designated, isolated spot, perhaps near the door, where the priest can address you without fear of your contaminating breath reaching the clean congregation. More likely, the ritual takes place in the churchyard, near an open grave dug symbolically for you. The priest, his voice resonating with the solemn authority of the church, begins the rites. The prayers are not for your recovery. That is deemed impossible. Your affliction, a mark of divine judgment or inscrutable will. Instead, they are prayers for your soul, as if you are already departed from the world of the living. He recites psalms of penitence, of suffering, of God's terrible majesty. The assembled villagers watch, a silent, fearful congregation, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity, pity, and a profound, almost primal relief that it is you, and not them, standing on the brink of this abyss. Then comes the reading of the prohibitions, a chilling litany of exclusions that will henceforth define every waking moment of your wretched existence. You are forbidden to enter churches, monasteries, mills, bakehouses, taverns, or any assembly of people. You are forbidden to wash your hands or any part of your afflicted body in a common stream or well, lest you poison the water for others. You are forbidden to touch any person, particularly women and children, or any goods being sold in the market, unless it is with a long stick to point from a distance. You must not eat or drink with any but other lepers. You must not walk on narrow paths or roads without sounding your warning. You must not answer any question if spoken to downwind, lest your breath carry the contagion. You must never appear without your leper's garb and your warning signal. Each thou shalt not is a stone cast, building a wall around you, sealing you off from the warmth of human fellowship, from every simple act of communal life you once took for granted. After the pronouncements, you are presented with the oi, instruments of your new, accursed identity. A voluminous, shapeless gown of dark, coarse wool or sackcloth, perhaps with a hood to further obscure your features. Your uniform of shame. A pair of gloves to cover your hands, lest their touch, however accidental, spread your blight. And then the most dreadful symbol of all, the clapper or the leper's bell. 2 or 3 pieces of dry wood, which, when struck together, produce a sharp, distinctive, and utterly desolate rattling sound, or a small, harsh-toned bell. This will be your voice in the world now, not to engage in conversation, but to cry out unclean, unclean, to warn the healthy of your approach, to clear a path through a world that no longer wants you. You might also be given a begging bowl, a small wooden cup on a long handle, allowing you to receive alms without direct contact. The ritual often culminates in a symbolic burial. The priest might scoop a spadeful of earth from the open grave and sprinkle it over your head and shoulders, intoning words like, "Be thou dead to the world, but alive again unto God." He may bless your miserable attire, your clapper, your bowl. Not for your comfort, but as tokens of your officially sanctioned isolation. Your family, if they have been allowed to witness this final public degradation, can only watch, their faces ravaged by grief. Any last touch, any embrace, is strictly forbidden. They are parting from a ghost, a memory, someone who, in the eyes of God and man, has already crossed a terrible threshold. Then the expulsion itself. Escorted by the priest or a village official, you are led to the boundaries of your village, the place where the familiar fields and pathways give way to the unknown wilderness, or the king's highway. You are turned out, cast adrift, a solitary figure in a hostile world. Behind you, the life you knew, your home, your family, your friends, your very identity is gone, as if it never existed. Ahead lies what? A life of wandering, of begging, of slow, inexorable decay, of utter crushing loneliness. The clapper feels alien in your hand, its potential sound a terrifying promise of the desolation to come. The weight of the prohibitions, the stares of your former neighbors, the raw grief of your family, it all settles upon you, a burden heavier than any physical ailment. You take your first steps into this new, barren existence, no longer a person, but a leper, a pariah, unmade and cast out. The finality of your expulsion settles upon you like a physical blow, leaving you winded, disoriented, standing at the edge of a world that has just violently and irrevocably ejected you. The path back to your village, your home, your family, is now as impassable as if a great chasm had opened in the earth. You are a ghost in your own life, a walking specter of disease and dread. The silence that descends once the echoes of the priest's pronouncements and your mother's distant sobs fade is a terrifying, yawning void. You are utterly, terrifyingly alone. The sun which once warmed your face as you worked the fields now seems to beat down with a pitiless indifference, or perhaps even a malevolent glare. The gentle rustling of leaves in the forest, once a comforting sound, now whispers of unseen dangers, of being truly outside the flimsy protection of human society. Your first few days, or perhaps weeks, are a desperate, stumbling blur of fear and confusion. Where do you go? What do you do? The prohibitions read out at your unmaking echo in your mind. Stay off narrow paths, warn of your approach, touch no one, enter no place of common gathering. You find yourself skirting the edges of forest, following disused animal tracks, sleeping in ditches, or under the inadequate shelter of rocky overhangs. Hunger gnaws at your belly, a constant dull ache. Thirst cracks your lips. The small loaf of bread and jug of ale given to you at your expulsion are long gone, and the art of survival takes on a new, desperate urgency. The clapper, or the small, harsh bell they pressed into your trembling hand, feels like a brand, a tangible symbol of your accursed state. At first, the shame of using it is so profound you can barely bring yourself to sound it. To deliberately announce your wretchedness, to send that desolate rattle out into the world, feels like a fresh degradation with every click-clack. But then you learn. A startled woodcutter, stumbling upon you unexpectedly in the forest, recoils with a shout of terror and hurls his axe in your direction, not out of malice perhaps, but pure, unthinking fear. Or a group of children, their innocent cruelty more cutting than any adult's scorn, begin to pelt you with stones and filth when you inadvertently stray too close to a village lane in search of a cast-off scrap of food. You learn that the clapper, this instrument of your isolation, is also paradoxically your only shield, a warning that might just save you from a panicked blow or a shower of missiles. So you begin to use it, your heart sinking with each desolate click, the sound becoming the rhythm of your new solitary existence. Clack, clack. Unclean. Clack, clack. Make way for the damned. You see life, normal life, from a painful distance. A village nestled in a valley, smoke curling invitingly. From its chimneys, a haven you can never enter. Farmers working their fields, their laughter and shouts carried on the wind, a fellowship from which you are forever barred. A group of pilgrims on the road, their songs of faith a bitter mockery to your ears, for what faith can you now claim, when God himself seems to have marked you for suffering? If they spot you even from afar, their songs often turn to muttered prayers for protection, their pace quickening to put distance between their wholesome piety and your visible corruption. Sometimes a charitable soul, perhaps a nun from a distant priory or a devout villager, moved by a flicker of Christian pity, might leave a small parcel of food by the roadside, or at a designated leper's stone outside a village, but only after you have sounded your clapper and retreated to a safe prescribed distance. To receive these alms, you must often prostrate yourself, your face in the dust, your begging bowl extended on its long handle, a pantomime of utter abasement. Each morsel tastes of shame. The nights are the worst. The cold seeps into your bones, unrelieved by the warmth of a shared fire or the press of another human body. The sounds of the forest, the snap of a twig, the hoot of an owl, the distant howl of a wolf, take on monstrous significance. Every shadow seems to conceal a threat, not just from wild animals, but from desperate men, outlaws, or simply those who believe that doing violence to a leper is no crime at all. Your afflicted skin, the patches of numbness, the sores that refuse to heal, become a constant source of misery. You try to tend to them as best you can with stream water, drawn from a downstream, isolated spot, as per the rules, and perhaps some crushed leaves. But infection is a constant, lurking threat. The numbness is a cruel trickster. You might burn. Yourself on a small fire, you manage to kindle, or cut your foot on a sharp stone, and only realize the extent of the damage when the wound begins to fester, the smell of your own decay a horrifying new companion. Days bleed into weeks, a monotonous cycle of desperate foraging, fearful avoidance, and the soul-crushing loneliness of being a pariah. The world is a vast, unwelcoming wilderness, and you are its most wretched inhabitant. You are learning the bitter calculus of survival on the absolute margins of human existence, where every sunrise is a renewed struggle and every sunset brings the terror of the night. You wander aimless, driven by hunger and the desperate fading hope of finding something. What that something might be, you dare not even articulate. But then, perhaps from a passing carter who takes pity and shouts the information from a safe distance, or from another more seasoned outcast you encounter in the deep woods, you hear a whisper, a name. A leprosarium, a lazar house, a place where others of your kind are said to gather, a distant, rumored sanctuary, or perhaps just a slightly more organized hell. The thought of it fills you with a new, complicated dread, but also a flicker of something you haven't felt in an age, a desperate, almost unwilling pull towards the possibility of not being utterly alone. The whisper of a name, a place, leprosarium, lazar house, spittle, takes root in the barren soil of your despair. A sanctuary for the afflicted, some call it. A dumping ground for the unclean, others mutter. Whatever its true nature, the thought of it, the mere possibility of not being utterly alone in your wretchedness, becomes a desperate, flickering candle in the overwhelming darkness of your exile. The instinct to seek out others of your kind, those who share your terrible brand, wars with the ingrained fear of what such a congregation of suffering might truly entail. But the crushing weight of solitude, the gnawing hunger, the constant, nerve-shredding terror of a hostile world eventually tips the scale. You decide to seek this rumored haven, this colony of the damned. The journey is an ordeal in itself. You have no map, only vague directions shouted from a safe distance by a fearful carter or a pitying friar. You travel by the loneliest roads, through dense, unwelcoming forests and across barren heaths, always careful to keep your telltale clapper or bell sounding, always giving wide berth to any sign of healthy habitation. Each footfall is an effort, your afflicted limbs perhaps stiff and sore, the numbness in your feet making you stumble on unseen roots and stones. The sores on your body weep, attracting flies, and the rough leper's gown chafes your raw skin. You beg when you must, your voice, now perhaps hoarse and grating, crying out your abject pleas from the prescribed distance, your bowl extended. Sometimes a door slams shut in your face. Sometimes a dog is set upon you, but sometimes a small, furtive hand leaves a crust of bread or a bruised apple, on a designated stone. A tiny act of charity that feels monumental. Days blur into a monotonous cycle of painful travel, fitful, terrified sleep under hedgerows or in abandoned shepherds' huts, and the gnawing ache of hunger. The physical decay of your body is a constant, unwelcome companion. You might notice a new patch of thickened skin, the slow, relentless collapse of the bridge of your nose, or the way your fingers are beginning to curl and stiffen into useless claws. Each new symptom is a fresh wave of despair, a reminder of the inexorable progression of your disease. Then, finally, after what feels like an eternity of wandering, you see it. Often situated well outside the town walls, perhaps downwind to carry away the stench of sickness, or near a desolate marsh, the leprosarium looms into view. It's rarely a grand, welcoming edifice. More likely, it's a collection of low, dilapidated stone or timber buildings huddled together as if for mutual misery, perhaps surrounded by a crumbling wall or a ditch. A small, struggling chapel might stand at its center, its bell tolling a mournful, cracked note. The air around it is heavy, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, herbal poultices, decay, and sometimes the sweet, cloying scent of burning flesh from a rudimentary infirmary or a funeral pyre. The sound is a low murmur of coughing, groans, whispered prayers, and the ever-present desolate rattle of many clappers. Your first steps into this community of the afflicted are hesitant, filled with a mixture of trepidation and a strange, perverse sense of homecoming. Here, your disfigurements, your stench, your clapper do not elicit stares of horror or disgust, for everyone shares some mark of the same slow doom. But any relief at not being alone is quickly tempered by the shocking reality of what you now face. You see figures in various terrifying stages of the disease, men and women with faces ravaged into lion-like masks, their features distorted and swollen, limbs wrapped in rotting bandages, sightless eyes staring out from sunken sockets, bodies contorted by nerve damage, shuffling along with a painful, halting gait. The sheer, concentrated spectacle of human suffering is overwhelming. A vision of your own possible future laid bare. You are no longer unique in your misery. You are now one of many, a drop in an ocean of decay. The leprosarium has its own grim hierarchy, its own set of rules. There might be a master or a prioress, often a less afflicted leper or a non-leprous religious appointee who governs the small, desperate community with a firm, sometimes cruel hand. New arrivals like yourself are often relegated to the worst accommodations, the most meager rations. You learn that resources are scarce. Food, firewood, clean bandages, all are precious commodities, sometimes fought over with a desperation. Born of utter need. There is a routine, prayers in the dilapidated chapel, perhaps some light, supervised work in a small garden if you are able, tending to those even sicker than yourself, for who else will do it? And the organized begging expeditions where groups of lepers are sent out under strict rules to solicit alms from the nearby towns and villages, their combined clattering a more effective warning and plea. There might be moments of shared humanity, a rough camaraderie born of shared suffering. A story told around a smoky fire, a shared crust of bread, a hand, wrapped in its leper's glove, offered to help you rise. But there is also bitterness, resentment, the inevitable friction of desperate people trapped together in a decaying prison. The constant presence of death is palpable. Every day, someone worsens, someone cries out in their final agony, someone is wrapped in a shroud and carried to the leper's graveyard outside the walls. You have found a community, yes, but it is a community of the dying, a place where hope comes to wither, and the only certainty is the slow, relentless progression of the disease that has already unmade your life. The wilderness outside was terrifying in its solitude. This new wilderness, with fellow sufferers, presents its own unique soul-crushing brand of despair. Life within the leprosarium, this supposed sanctuary, quickly settles into a new kind of grim monotony, a rhythm dictated by decay, devotion, and desperation. The initial shock of seeing so many others ravaged by the same affliction that consumes you gradually fades, not into acceptance, but into a dull, pervasive horror that becomes the backdrop to your every waking moment. You are no longer just an outcast, you are now an inmate in a prison of flesh, surrounded by a brotherhood and sisterhood of the damned, each a decaying mirror reflecting your own inexorable fate. The days are marked by the tolling of the chapel bell, a cracked, mournful sound that summons you and your fellow sufferers to compulsory prayer. Religion is the bedrock of these institutions, often run by austere monastic orders or pious lay fraternities. The services are long, the sermons filled with exhortations to repentance, to accept your suffering as God's will, a penance for sins known or unknown, or perhaps even a path to a purer, albeit agonizing, martyrdom. You kneel on the cold stone floor, your diseased limbs aching, your voice, if it still serves you, joining the hoarse chorus of whispered amens. Does faith offer solace here? For some, perhaps, a fragile reed to cling to in a storm of despair. For you, it might feel like another layer of judgment, another reminder of your perceived unworthiness in the eyes of a harsh and distant deity. Your own body continues its slow, relentless betrayal. The numb patches on your skin might spread, making you clumsy, prone to injuries you don't feel until they fester and stink. Your fingers, if the disease has taken hold there, might continue to curl inwards, shortening, stiffening the joints, swelling until they resemble little more than useless, gnarled claws. You might watch with a detached horror as a toe or a fingertip, having lost all sensation and blood supply, withers, blackens, and eventually drops away, a small, almost insignificant piece of your unmaking. Ulcers erupt, weeping foul-smelling fluids that stain your meager rags and attract swarms of flies in the warmer months. The distinctive facies leonina, the lion-like countenance with its thickened furrowed brow, flattened nose, and nodular growths might begin to etch itself onto your reflection if you dare to glimpse it in a murky puddle or a rare polished piece of metal. Your sight might dim, the world receding into a hazy blur, or your voice might degenerate further into a painful, almost unintelligible croak. Each new symptom is a fresh nail in your coffin, a tangible sign of the disease's victory. Beyond prayer, what occupies your time? If you are still relatively able-bodied, you might be assigned tasks. Tending a small, struggling herb garden within the compound, its produce more for the keepers than the inmates, mending the tattered rags that pass for clothing, or most dreadfully, assisting in the care of those whose afflictions are far more advanced than your own. This means cleaning their sores, feeding those who can no longer lift a hand to their own mouths, and witnessing firsthand the final gruesome stages of the disease, a terrifying preview of your own potential end. If you are too weak for even these tasks, you simply exist, a decaying husk waiting for the inevitable. Food is scarce, a constant source of anxiety and sometimes bitter conflict. The leprosarium depends heavily on charitable donations, which are often meager and unreliable. A thin, watery gruel, a hunk of stale bread, occasionally some withered vegetables. This is the fare that sustains your wretched existence. Hunger is a familiar companion, gnawing at your insides, weakening your already compromised body. The living conditions are often squalid. You sleep on straw pallets, perhaps crammed into overcrowded, poorly ventilated dormitories where the stench of sickness and unwashed bodies is overpowering. The cold of winter seeps through the crumbling walls, and the damp breeds agues and coughs that carry off the weakest. Sanitation, as you understand it, is a distant dream. Yet, even in this abyss of suffering, fleeting moments of a strange, twisted humanity might flicker. A shared glance of understanding with another leper, as the master drones on in a particularly lengthy sermon. A rough hand, gloved and ulcerated, helping you to your feet when you stumble. A whispered story from a life before the sickness, a bittersweet memory of health and belonging. These are small, precious sparks in the overwhelming darkness, but there is also cruelty. Despair breeds bitterness. The stronger might prey on the weaker, stealing a precious crust of bread or a cleaner bandage. Old grudges from the outside. World might fester and erupt within these walls. The constant proximity to so much suffering can either forge bonds of empathy or shatter them into shards of selfish survival. Death is your most constant neighbor. Not a week passes, sometimes, not even a day, without the sound of the death rattle from a nearby pallet, or the sight of a still form being wrapped in a cheap shroud. The funerals are brief, perfunctory affairs, often just a few muttered prayers in the leper's graveyard, another shallow grave dug in the already crowded earth. You watch these departures with a numb detachment, or perhaps a surge of cold fear. Each one is a reminder, each one is a bell tolling, eventually, for you. Hope is a dangerous illusion here. The only certainty is the slow unraveling of your body and the eventual welcome or dreaded embrace of the grave. And as you lie on your straw pallet at night, listening to the symphony of coughs, groans, and desperate prayers that fills the darkness, you wonder how many more sunrises you will endure in this living tomb, this place where the world sends. It's accursed to be forgotten. The leprosarium, with its grim routines and its population of the slowly dying, becomes your entire world. The memories of your former life, the scent of freshly turned earth in your father's fields, the warmth of your mother's hand, the taste of clean water from the village well, begin to fade like old tapestries left too long in the sun, their vibrant colors bleached into muted, sorrowful shades. Time itself seems to warp within these walls of woe. Days bleed into one another, a monotonous succession of prayers, meager rations, festering sores, and the ever-present chorus of coughs and moans. The changing seasons are marked not by joyous festivals or the rhythm of the agricultural year, but by the increased harshness of the winter cold in your drafty dormitory, or the sweltering, fly-infested misery of summer when the stench of decay becomes almost unbearable. One of the most vital and most humiliating aspects of your existence is the begging expedition. The leprosarium cannot sustain itself. It relies on the alms of the clean world, and you, if you are still able to walk, are pressed into service as a solicitor of this reluctant charity. Several times a week, a small group of you, the fitter lepers, are dispatched from the compound, your clappers sounding your mournful approach, your begging bowls extended. You are instructed to follow specific routes, to approach designated leper stones or crosses outside villages and monasteries, and to never, ever deviate from the prescribed rules of conduct. Walking becomes an ordeal. If the disease is affecting your feet and legs, each step can be a slow agony or a precarious, stumbling journey as numbness robs you of your balance. Your gait might become a shuffling, lurching movement, the leper's gait that further marks you as an object of pity and revulsion. As you approach a village, the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of your group's clappers precedes you, a sound designed to clear the path, to warn women to pull their children indoors, to allow men to turn their faces away or cross to the other side of the road. You see the shutters slam, the doors bolt. You hear the hurried whispers, the muttered prayers for protection at the designated begging spot, often a lonely crossroads or a stone set well away from any dwelling. You must arrange yourselves, perhaps kneeling or prostrating, your voices, hoarse and weak, raised in a prescribed plea for alms. Charity, good Christians, for the love of God, pity for the poor lepers. You cry out your shame, your affliction, your desperate need to an unseen audience. Sometimes, after a long, humiliating wait, a figure might emerge from a nearby cottage or manor gate, a servant, a pious woman, a friar, and deposit a few scraps of food, a handful of dried beans, perhaps a small debased coin, into your extended bowls. They do so quickly, their faces averted, often making the sign of the cross as they retreat, as if to ward off the contamination of your very presence. There is no conversation, no shared glance of humanity, only the stark transaction of reluctant charity given to the utterly debased. The meager alms you collect are brought back to the leprosarium, pooled under the watchful eye of the master, or prioress, and then redistributed. It is never enough. The hunger remains, a dull, constant ache, a reminder of your absolute dependence on a world that despises you. Sometimes the begging expeditions yield nothing but curses and stones. Fear of contagion can easily curdle into outright hostility. A bad harvest, a local outbreak of some other sickness, a fiery sermon from a particularly zealous priest warning against consorting with the unclean, any of the begging expeditions, those humiliating forays into a world that recoils from your very shadow, become a grimly accepted part of your existence. They are your lifeline, however frayed, to the basic sustenance that keeps your decaying body animated. But it's within the crumbling walls of the leprosarium itself, in the constant suffocating company of your fellow afflicted, that the true grinding misery of your condition often finds its sharpest edges. This is not a gentle community of mutual support you've stumbled into. It's a microcosm of desperation, a charnel house of living souls where the veneer of civility is often stripped away by suffering, scarcity, and the ever-present specter of a slow, undignified death. The master or prioress who governs your leper house, often appointed by the local bishop or a wealthy patron, wields absolute authority. Their piety might be genuine, a sincere calling to tend to God's most wretched flock, or just as easily, it could be a veneer for a stern, unyielding disciplinarian who sees you and your kind primarily as a burden to be managed, a penance to be endured by them as much as by you. Their pronouncements are law. They control the meager rations, the allocation of leaky roof space in the crowded dormitories, the assignment of tasks, and the meting out of punishments for any perceived infraction of the house rules, rules which often seem designed more for their convenience than your comfort. A stolen crust of bread, a moment of defiance born of despair, a failure to attend the endless prayers with sufficient fervor, any of these can result in a beating, confinement, in a dark cell, or the withholding of your already inadequate food. You are utterly at their mercy, a powerless inmate in their grim domain. And what of your fellow lepers, this fraternity of the damned? You might imagine a bond forged in shared suffering, a collective empathy that transcends the horrors of the flesh. Sometimes, perhaps, you see glimpses of it, a stronger leper helping a weaker one to the latrine pit, a hoarded morsel of food secretly shared, a story whispered in the dark to distract from the gnawing pain of an ulcerated limb. But more often, the sheer, unrelenting misery breeds a different kind of interaction. When resources are scarce, when every day is a battle for survival, kindness can become a luxury few can afford. The stronger, less afflicted inmates might dominate the weaker, claiming the better sleeping spots nearer the feeble hearth in winter, or the lion's share of any alms brought back from a begging run. Petty squabbles erupt over a lost rag, a perceived slight, the ever-present fear of contagion, making even accidental contact a source of bitter recrimination among those who are already deeply contaminated. Your own slow physical unraveling continues, a private horror played out in a public theater of decay. You might lose the ability to grip your begging bowl, your fingers having become too stiff and clawed. Your eyesight might fade further, plunging your world into a perpetual twilight, making navigation within the crowded, obstacle-strewn confines of the leprosarium a daily hazard. The sores on your body might deepen, exposing bone, the stench of your own putrefaction, a constant nauseating companion. And you see this happening to everyone around you. You watch as the man who slept on the pallet next to yours, with whom you might have exchanged a few grunted words, gradually loses his features, his voice, his very resemblance to a human being, until one morning he is simply a still, silent bundle to be carried out to the ever-expanding graveyard. Occasionally a physician or a learned monk, perhaps driven by a mixture of morbid curiosity and a genuine desire to understand the affliction, might visit the leprosarium. They bring with them not cures, for there are none, but theories and treatments that often add another layer of torment to your existence. You might be subjected to bleedings, purgings, or diets of specific, often unpalatable foods. Perhaps they will prescribe poultices made of viper's flesh, or recommend you bathe in the blood of a freshly slaughtered animal, or even endure the searing agony of a branding iron applied to your sores in a misguided attempt to burn out the corruption. These interventions, born of ignorance and superstition, offer no relief, only more pain and the bitter ashes of false hope. Each failed cure is another confirmation of your inexorable slide into oblivion. Your sense of self, your very identity, begins to erode. You are no longer John the farmer or Thomas the cooper's son. You are simply Leper, one of a nameless, faceless mass of suffering. Your individual story, your memories of a life before the sickness, seem to belong to someone else, a distant ghost. The disfigurements rob you of your unique features, transforming you into a grotesque caricature that the outside world has already defined. Even among your fellow sufferers, your individuality is subsumed by the shared brand of your disease. What becomes of faith in such a place? For some, it might become a desperate, fervent clinging to the promise of an afterlife where there is no sickness, no suffering. The endless cycle of prayers and penance becomes their only focus, their only solace. For you, perhaps, the unceasing, unmerited agony leads to a hardening of the heart, a bitter questioning of a God who could allow such horrors or even ordain them. Or maybe it's just a dull, apathetic resignation, a spiritual numbness that mirrors the physical deadening of your nerves. Each toll of the chapel bell can sound like either a call to hope or a mocking reminder of your forsaken state. The company of the afflicted offers no escape from your own internal desolation. It merely provides 1,000 reflections of your own misery, a constant suffocating reminder that here, in the Lazar house, you are all slowly, inexorably unraveling together. The leprosarium, once a terrifying new world, has become the only world you know. The faces of your fellow sufferers in their myriad states of decay are more familiar to you now than the memories of your own healthy kin. The relentless progression of your disease, once a source of sharp, panicked terror, has settled into a dull, chronic ache of acceptance, punctuated by moments of acute misery when a new ulcer erupts, a fresh piece of your flesh succumbs to numbness, or another finger curls irrevocably into a useless claw. You are deep into the twilight of your wasted life, a journey marked not by years, but by the slow, inexorable surrender of your body to the sickness. Your appearance, you know without needing the cracked, cloudy piece of polished metal. Some inmates, hoard like a treasure, is likely monstrous to any eyes, still accustomed to the sight of health. The leonine facies, that dreaded thickening and furrowing of the facial skin, may well have claimed your features, blurring your original visage into a grotesque mask. Your nose, perhaps, has begun to collapse, the cartilage eaten away, leaving a flattened, shadowed ruin. Your lips might be swollen, cracked, making speech a painful, slobbering affair. Your eyes, if they still function, peer out from beneath. Heavy, drooping lids, perhaps clouded by the disease, the world a dim, distorted canvas. Or perhaps they are already sightless, plunging you into a new, terrifying darkness, where the sounds and smells of the Lazar house, the groans, the stench of unhealed sores, the rattle of clappers, become your only guides. The loss of sensation, once a strange and localized phenomenon, might now be widespread. You could burn your hand on a hot coal from the meager fire, and not know it until the smell of your own scorching flesh reaches your nostrils, or until another inmate points with a grunt to the blistering wound. Your feet, numb and misshapen, are prone to injuries you don't detect, leading to deep, intractable ulcers that can expose the bone beneath. You are, in many ways, a living corpse, your flesh dying by inches, while your heart stubbornly continues to beat. This physical numbness is mirrored by a creeping emotional deadening. The daily parade of suffering, the constant proximity to death, has a way of scouring the soul, leaving behind a landscape of bleak resignation. You become one of the older ones, not necessarily in years, but in the advancement of your affliction. New arrivals, fresh from their own unmaking rituals, look at you with the same horror you once felt upon entering this place. You are a walking memento mori, a terrifying portent of what awaits them. Do you offer them comfort, a word of grim advice? Or do you, like so many others, retreat into the small, defended space of your own misery, too weary, too broken, to extend a hand that might not even be felt? Sometimes a memory of your former life will surface with an agonizing, unexpected clarity. The taste of your mother's stew, the rough feel of your father's homespun tunic, the sound of children's laughter in the village square, before they knew to fear you. These shards of a lost existence are almost unbearable, a stark contrast to the fetid, hopeless reality of your present. Regret is a constant, bitter companion. Regret for a life unlived, for joys untasted, for a future stolen, not by malice or war, but by the silent, insidious workings of your own blood and bone. As your body weakens further, you become more dependent on the grim charity of the leprosarium's routine. You might be moved to a section reserved for the gravely ill, a place where the air is even thicker with the anticipation of death. Here, the ministrations you receive are perfunctory, carried out by other, slightly less afflicted lepers, or by those stoic, overworked lay brothers or sisters who manage the house. A sip of water, a change of soiled rags, a muttered prayer, these are the final comforts offered. The thought of your own death becomes less an abstract fear and more an imminent, almost tangible presence. You wonder about the leper's graveyard, that patch of unconsecrated earth outside the walls, where so many of your companions have already been laid to rest. Will there be anyone to mourn you, even within this community of the forsaken? Or will your passing be just another brief interruption in the daily grind of suffering, another pallet space cleared for the next unfortunate soul? The priest might visit more frequently now, his words about repentance and the hope of heavenly reward falling on ears that are perhaps too weary, too cynical, or too simply ravaged by pain and confusion to find much solace. You listen, or you don't. What can words offer against the overwhelming evidence of a life defined by unrelenting earthly damnation? You are a vessel of decay, a testament to the fragility of flesh, a pariah even unto the brink of the grave. The sun still rises and sets beyond the grimy windows of the Lazar house. The seasons still turn, but within these walls, time is measured only by the slow, agonizing tick of your body's final surrender. And you wait in the dim, fetid twilight for the ultimate release or the ultimate horror that death will bring to a medieval leper. The twilight deepens both outside the grimy, horn-paned windows of the Lazar house and within the landscape of your own ravaged body. The days, once a monotonous blur of suffering, now begin to fray at the edges, your consciousness flickering like a dying candle. Your world has shrunk to the confines of your straw pallet, to the small, suffocating space around your failing form. The cacophony of the leprosarium, the groans, the coughing, the distant rhythmic clatter of a begging party setting out, fades in and out, a distorted soundtrack to your final agonizing chapter, your limbs if they are not already lost. To you, through numbness or amputation by decay, are leaden, unresponsive. The effort to draw breath becomes a monumental struggle, each ragged inhalation a painful reminder of the life that stubbornly clings to your wasted frame. The sores that cover your body are no longer just sources of pain or discomfort. They are gaping wounds, portals through which your vitality seeps away. The stench of your own decay, a smell you have lived with for so long it had almost become unnoticeable, now seems to intensify, a final olfactory insult from your treacherous flesh. In moments of lucidity, your mind, like a cornered animal, might dart back to the sunlit meadows of your youth, to the imagined taste of your mother's bread, the rough comfort of your father's hand. These memories, once bittersweet, are now almost unbearable in their clarity, a stark, cruel contrast to the fetid darkness that envelops you. Or perhaps delirium claims you, painting terrifying visions on the inside of your eyelids, grotesque demons tormenting your soul for some forgotten sin, or the accusing faces of those who cast you out, their eyes burning with righteous contempt. You might cry out, your voice a broken, unintelligible croak, but in the crowded misery of the leper house, where suffering is the common tongue, your distress barely registers. Does the priest come? Perhaps. A tonsured figure might loom over you, muttering Latin prayers for the dying, his face a mask of professional piety. He might offer you the last rites, a hurried, perfunctory ritual performed with an understandable reluctance to linger too close to your infectious, decaying form. His touch, if he dares to administer unction, is fleeting, almost non-existent. Is there comfort in these final holy words? Or do they sound like a judgment, a confirmation of your unworthiness, a final stamp of damnation before you are consigned to the earth? The fear of dying unshriven, of facing your Maker with the stain of your affliction still upon your soul, was a terror drilled into every medieval mind. For you, that fear is compounded by a lifetime of being treated as already cursed. The act of dying itself is not a peaceful release, no gentle slipping away. It is a grim, solitary battle fought in the trenches of your own decomposing body. Your breath hitches, rattles, then stills. Your heart, that stubborn, tormented muscle, flutters one last desperate protest before succumbing to the inevitable. There are no loved ones to hold your hand, to whisper words of comfort, to close your eyes in a final act of tenderness. Your passing might be noticed only when your pallet mate, perhaps equally close to death, realizes your groans have finally ceased, or when the stench of your final surrender becomes too overpowering to ignore even in this house of foul odors. What happens then to the earthly vessel that was once you? There is no dignity in a leper's death, no loving preparation of the body, no washing or anointing by grieving kin. Your remains are likely handled with a rough haste, perhaps by other stronger lepers assigned the grim task, or by weary lay brothers whose compassion has long since been eroded by the sheer volume of death. You are wrapped in the same coarse shroud you may have worn in life, or perhaps just bundled into your own tattered rags. There is no coffin, no carefully carved memorial. Your final journey is a short, unceremonious one, from the fetid dormitory to the leper's graveyard, that desolate patch of unconsecrated ground that lies somewhere beyond the leprosarium's walls, often shunned and overgrown. Here, among the countless other nameless, forgotten dead, you are consigned to a shallow pit, perhaps a communal grave where bodies are layered one upon another. A few spadefuls of earth are thrown over you, a hasty utilitarian act of disposal rather than a respectful burial. No bells toll for your departure from this world, save perhaps the mournful crack bell of the leprosarium's own chapel, a sound that signals not remembrance, but merely another vacancy on a straw pallet. In the clean world you left behind, you are already a ghost, a half-forgotten shame. Your name, if it is ever spoken, is likely uttered with a shudder or a prayer. There will be no masses said for your soul in your village church, no lovingly tended grave where family might come to mourn. You have died as you lived for so long. An outcast, unclean, beyond the pale of human society, and many would believe, beyond the grace of God. The earth that covers you is indifferent, and the world moves on, eager to forget the terrifying reality of your suffering. Even in death, the profound, isolating misery of your existence as a medieval leper finds its ultimate bleak expression, and so your wretched existence as a medieval leper draws to its unhallowed close. Your body, a ruin of flesh and bone, lies in an unmarked, unconsecrated grave in the forgotten corner of a leper's field. The world of the living, the clean world that cast you out with such ritualistic horror, has already begun the process of erasing even the faintest memory of your passage through it. Any meager possessions you might have clung to within the Lazar house, a worn wooden bowl, a tattered rag that once offered a sliver of warmth, are likely burned, considered as tainted and dangerous as your corpse. The space you occupied on a flea-ridden straw pallet is quickly filled by another unfortunate soul, another body beginning its slow public decay. Your name, if it was ever recorded by the keepers of the leprosarium, is just another entry in a grim ledger of the damned, soon to be forgotten. Back in the village you once called home, the relief at your confirmed departure might be palpable, though unspoken. Perhaps a final prayer is offered in the church, not for your soul's salvation, but for the continued protection of the healthy from the scourge you represented. The small hut where you were born, where you first showed the signs of your affliction, might be viewed with lingering suspicion, perhaps even subjected to a ritual cleansing with holy water and smoke to purge any lingering miasma of your presence. Your family, if they still live, bear the silent shame of your condition, a stain on their lineage that they will carry to their own graves. They will not speak of you to their children, or if they do, it will be in hushed, fearful tones, a cautionary tale of divine displeasure or inexplicable misfortune. You have become a void, an absence, a story best left untold. Why did it suck so profoundly, so utterly to be a medieval leper? It wasn't just the relentless, visible decay of your own body, the crumbling flesh, the lost digits, the disfigured face, the creeping numbness that stole your senses one by one. That was a private daily horror, a betrayal from within that you were powerless to halt. But the true soul-crushing misery was forged in the crucible of societal revulsion, in the fear and superstition that defined your world's reaction to your plight. You were not merely sick, you were deemed unclean both physically and spiritually. Your affliction was widely seen as a visible manifestation of sin, a divine punishment for some transgression, known or unknown, yours or your ancestors. You were a walking sermon, a terrifying example of God's wrath, and as such, you were to be shunned, isolated, treated as if already dead to the world of grace. The rituals of your unmaking, the massive separation, the bestowing of the clapper, and the shapeless gown, the reading of the endless prohibitions, were designed not just to protect the healthy, but to strip you of your humanity, to reinforce your status as an outcast beyond the pale of compassion. Every clack of your warning bell was a reaffirmation of your accursed state, every averted gaze a fresh wound to your spirit. The forced begging, the reliance on the grudging, fearful charity of others was a constant, daily humiliation, a reminder of your utter dependence on a society that despised you. Even within the grim confines of the leprosarium, surrounded by fellow sufferers, there was often little solace. It was a congregation of the dying, a repository of despair where hope was a foreign currency. Scarcity, fear, and the relentless progression of the disease could erode compassion, fostering an environment where the basest survival instincts often prevailed, and the treatments, when offered, were usually just another form of torment, born of ignorance and fear, promising nothing but more pain. You lost everything: your family, your home, your livelihood, your name, your face, your very sense of self. You became a symbol, a pariah, your individual story swallowed by the monstrous archetype of the leper. There was no dignity in your suffering, no heroic narrative to cling to. You were simply an object of horror, a living embodiment of decay, a problem to be managed, contained, and ultimately forgotten. The silence of history that swallows the personal stories of countless individuals like you is perhaps the final enduring testament to this profound suckiness. Your life was a silent scream, unheard by a world that chose to look away, to condemn, and to forget. And that, in the brutal, unforgiving landscape of the medieval era, was the devastating, unalterable truth of your wretched existence. And there you have it, a glimpse into the profoundly wretched existence of a medieval leper. A tough journey to narrate, and no doubt a tough one to listen through. But these are the stories that often get glossed over. And I think they're crucial for understanding the full spectrum of human experience in these stark and brutal times. Thank you for sticking with me through all the episode of this exploration. I truly love digging into these historical realities, trying to imagine what it must have felt like to live these forgotten lives. If you found this series compelling, or if it gave you a new perspective, please do hit that like button. It's a small click for you, but it genuinely helps the channel reach more people who appreciate this kind of content. And of course, if you haven't already, consider subscribing so you don't miss our next descent into the fascinating and often horrifying annals of history. We've got plenty more tales to tell. What other historical lives or grim professions do you think deserve the "why it sucks to be" treatment? I get some of my best ideas from your suggestions, so please drop your thoughts and ideas in the comments below. I do read them all. Before you go, if you were chilled by the leper's tale, you might be morbidly curious about another profession that faced its own unique set of horrors and societal burdens. Why not check out our previous series, Why It Sucks to Be a Medieval Executioner? From inherited curses to the weight of 1,000 deaths. It's another unflinching look at a life most would never choose. Click on the video on your screen now, and I'll see you over there for another journey into the past. Thanks for watching.